Today, we are immersing ourselves in the volatile, messy, and frankly, absolutely electrifying world of abstract expressionism. This deep dive is all about the man who fundamentally redefined how art could be created and well perceived, Jackson Pollock.
Oh, Jackson Pollock, yeah.
He turned painting into performance, replaced the delicate brush with, a crude stick?
Sometimes, yeah. Or trowels, knives, whatever worked.
And transformed the traditional canvas into an arena for action.
When you stand in front of one of those huge canvases, those dense, sprawling webs of color, they almost look like liquid constellations. You're really confronting a profound paradox. This is Jackson Pollock, born 1912, died 1956. And he is, without doubt, the pivotal American painter of the 20th century.
Okay, let's unpack this. His technique, that's what brought the drama, right? And the controversy.
Oh, absolutely, instantly.
We're not talking at an easel here. We're talking about pouring, dripping, splashing liquid household paint
onto a canvas laid out flat on the floor.
Horizontal. It was so physical, so utterly new, that critics, they scrambled for terms to describe it.
They landed on things like all-over painting, which captures that lack of a central focus.
And the enduring label, action painting,
which really emphasizes the process, the movement.
What's fascinating here is how his technique just immediately triggered this huge critical conflict. It really set the stage for modern art debates for decades.
Totally. On one side, you had intense praise. People were struck by the sheer immediacy, the energy of the creation itself. And the total abstraction. It demanded that the viewer engage with the energy of the work, not hunt for a picture of something recognizable.
But then on the other side, the derision was just as fierce.
Oh, yeah. Vicious sometimes.
Critics famously dismissed his work as, mere unorganized explosions, random effects.
Suggesting it lacked skill, lacked meaning. Some headlines literally called it a joke in bad taste.
That immediate visceral split, it just underscores the power of what Pollock was doing. He was forcing the public to question the very definition of skill of art itself.
And that intensity, that raw energy in the paintings.
Yeah.
It speaks directly to the man behind the canvas.
Right. Pollock had this notoriously reclusive and extremely volatile personality.
He fought a relentless, lifelong battle with alcoholism, a truly devastating struggle.
And you feel that inner chaos, that raw intensity was somehow poured directly into his art.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that struggle ultimately led to his tragic death. He was just 44 years old in 1956.
So what does this all mean for us, looking back?
Well, we're exploring how this one individual, through a technique based on what looks like chaos, but maybe wasn't.
Right, controlled chaos.
Did more than just redefine how art could be made. He fundamentally redefined what it could be worth.
He successfully transformed common house paint, applied with a stick, into a global multi-million-dollar commodity. It's kind of incredible.
It really is. The journey there is extraordinary.
So, to truly get a handle on the radical rebellion of that drip period, we really have to start at the beginning. We need to understand the roots that shaped his unique perspective.
Makes sense.
Jackson Pollock was born Paul Jackson Pollock, Cody, Wyoming, 1912. Youngest of 5 brothers.
And the family moved constantly, Arizona, California. He spent his formative years absorbing the landscapes of the West.
Which must have instilled a kind of non-traditional worldview from the start.
Those Western beginnings were absolutely critical, I think. You mentioned the moving around, but also during surveying trips with his father, Pollock had significant exposure to Native American culture.
Oh, okay. How did that feed in?
Well, it likely provided him with an early visual framework that was less concerned with the linear, fixed perspective of traditional European painting. Think about Navajo sand painting, for instance.
The process, the ritual.
Exactly. A different sense of ritual, of spatial organization in art. It plants a seed.
And beyond the landscapes of the American West, his other big early influence came from, south of the border. The political fervor of the Mexican muralists.
Huge influence. When he moved to New York City in 1930, he studied under Thomas Hart Benton at the Art Students League. Benton was a big name.
Regionalism, right? American scenes.
Yeah, but it was Jose Clemente Orozco who truly became Pollock's idol. Pollock apparently once called Orozco's huge fresco Prometheus the greatest painting in North America. High praise.
Wow. So what did he take from Orozco? The scale, the drama.
Immense, dynamic, emotionally charged work. And while Pollock didn't really adopt Benton's subject matter, those sort of idealized rural American scenes, He definitely absorbed Benton's rhythmic way of applying paint.
And Ben's attitude, too.
Absolutely. Benton's fierce independence, his resistance to the status quo, probably resonated deeply. So that foundational apprenticeship at NYC, it solidified his technical command, even if he was destined to completely obliterate those traditional boundaries later on.
But beneath the surface of all this artistic exploration, the internal pressure was building. You mentioned the alcoholism.
Right. From 1938 to 1942, he was working for the WPA Federal Art Project. That gave him some income, some structure.
The lifeline during the Depression, yeah.
But he was simultaneously fighting this established, serious alcoholism. And this is when he sought help through Jungian psychotherapy.
With Dr. Joseph Henderson first, then Dr. Violet Staub de Laszlo.
And this was a pivotal moment, really integrating his psychological struggles with his art. The therapists, especially Henderson, engaged him through his art. They encouraged him to make drawings as a way to explore and articulate what was going on inside.
So the therapy wasn't just talk, it was visual.
Exactly. And you can see Jungian concepts, those universal symbols, primal figures, archetypes, emerging directly in his paintings from this period. They're often dark, dense.
Like Guardians of the Secret.
Precisely. Laden with totemic figures, mythological elements. He's clearly channeling that internal subconscious world onto the canvas.
That link between psychology and process seems absolutely key to understanding him. It wasn't just therapy in a vacuum. It was a way of integrating his volatile inner life into his artistic expression.
And it's also why some psychiatrists, looking back, have hypothesized that Pollock might have had bipolar disorder.
Suggesting the manic energy fueling those creative bursts and then the crushing depressions were maybe symptoms of a specific neurological reality?
It's a hypothesis, yeah, but it fits the pattern for some observers, the extreme highs and lows.
And all that tension, that internal searching and external study, it kind of culminates in his professional big break in 1943.
The Peggy Guggenheim moment.
He secured a contract with her, the powerhouse art dealer Peggy Guggenheim, in July of 43. That was huge. It gave him a financial lifeline, institutional backing.
Major commission.
The legendary commission. That monumental 8-by-20-foot mural for the entryway to her new townhouse.
Massive. And apparently, it had to be completed in this single, intense burst of energy. There's a great anecdote about that piece.
Oh, yeah.
Guggenheim's friend and advisor, none other than Marcel Duchamp,
the daddiest master,
specifically suggested that Pollock painted on canvas rather than directly on the wall.
Smart move for portability.
Exactly. Crucial advice. It allowed the work to be shown later, moved, preserved. It cemented its historical importance. And when the mural was finally unveiled, the art world really took notice.
Enter Clement Greenberg,
his most crucial champion. Greenberg provided this immediate, powerful endorsement. He basically said, I took one look at it and I thought, no, that's great art. And I knew Jackson was the greatest painter this country had produced.
Wow. Talk about validation. Immediate and definitive. That must have shifted the tectonic plates of the New York art scene.
It really did. And another early champion, James Johnson Sweeney, curator at MoMA, he captured that raw energy beautifully in the catalog for Pollock's first exhibition.
What did he say?
He wrote, Pollock's talent is volcanic. It has fire. It is unpredictable. It is undisciplined. It spills out of itself in a mineral prodigality not yet crystallized.
Volcanic. That's perfect. It sounds like someone witnessing a force of nature, not just an artist.
Which is exactly how many perceived him then and now.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The revolution that defines Pollock's global legacy. The drip technique.
The thing everyone knows him for.
But it wasn't like a sudden flash of genius, right? It was more of a synthesis. Years of influence, technical experiment.
Absolutely. The very first exposure to the idea of using liquid paint, which is the core component of the drip style, that happened way back in 1936.
Oh, that early?
Yeah, at an experimental workshop in New York City run by the radical Mexican muralist David Alfaro Siqueiros.
Another muralist connection.
Right. Siqueiros was known for using industrial paints, unorthodox application methods like spraying and pouring. Pollock was exposed to all that. And he was already using paint pouring as one of several techniques on canvases in the early 1940s. You can see it in works like Male and Female.
So it was brewing for a while.
It was brewing. But the true revolutionary commitment, what we now call the drip period, that really took off after he and Lee Krasner moved out of the city.
To Springs, New York, that quiet homestead, that was 47 to 50, roughly.
Exactly. That move was crucial. It gave him the physical space he needed to work at an immense scale. He converted the barn into his studio,
The legendary barn.
And committed fully to working on unstretched canvas laid out directly on the large barn floor.
This shift, it wasn't just practical moving it to the floor. You said it was philosophical, too.
Profoundly philosophical. By taking the canvas off the vertical easel and putting it on the ground, he totally altered his relationship to the work. He actually explained it himself.
What did he say?
He said, "I feel nearer, more part of the painting, since this way I can walk around it, work from the four sides, and literally be in the painting."
Literally in the painting. The canvas becomes an environment, not just a window you look through.
Precisely. An arena for action.
And he didn't just ditch the easel, he ditched the traditional tools, too.
Mostly, yeah. No palette in the traditional sense, fewer brushes used in the conventional way. He preferred sticks, trowels, knives.
Even basting syringes, I read.
Apparently so. Whatever allowed him to control the flow of liquid paint. But the materials themselves, the paint, that was just as revolutionary.
Household paint, right. Not fancy oils.
Synthetic resin-based alkyd enamels. Basically, high-quality liquid house paints. Like DuPont Duco.
Why was that choice so radical?
Several technical reasons. Unlike traditional oils, these enamels dry really quickly. That allowed him to build up complex layers, overlapping colors, without them just blending into a muddy mess.
Okay, control through speed.
Sort of. And they also created this distinctively glossy, almost industrial sheen. A stark contrast to the matte finish of fine art oil paint. It subverted the whole tradition that art must use expensive, specialized materials.
He called it a natural growth out of a need, right? Like the material suited the method.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being provocative. It was about finding the right tool for the job he wanted to do.
Which brings us back to action painting. This demanded the physical force of his entire body.
You see it in the films Hans Nemeth made later. He moved energetically around the canvas, almost as if in a dance, flinging, dripping, spattering the paint from all sides.
But he pushed back against the idea. It was just random, didn't he? He hated the idea of accident.
Vehemently denied it. He insisted his technique was a calculated risk. It was this intense combination of his practiced control, the movement of his body, the unique properties of the paint.
And factors he couldn't fully control.
Right. The natural viscous flow of the paint, gravity pulling it down, how the canvas absorbed it. It was like a conversation, a collaboration with the materials and the physics of the process, not just random flinging.
And Pollock himself, he connected this process back to deeper historical roots. He recognized working on the floor wasn't entirely new in human history.
He did. When describing his style, he explicitly stated, "This is akin to the methods of the Indian sand painters of the West."
That's a fascinating link. It connects his very modern work back to ancient ceremonial art, emphasizing process, maybe temporary creation, over just making a permanent object to hang on a wall.
It reframes it completely. But the debate over influence, it doesn't stop there. While Pollock is often hailed as this singular, isolated genius,
Are always influences.
we have to acknowledge the contribution of Ukrainian-American artist Janet Sobel.
Sobel. Okay, tell me about her.
She was another early innovator using poured paint techniques.
Yeah.
Art critic Clement Greenberg, Pollock's big champion, reported seeing Sobel's work in 1946. He called it the first truly all-over painting he'd ever encountered.
Before Pollock's main drip period.
Yes. And Greenberg later noted that Pollock himself admitted that Sobel's work had made an impression on him.
So that suggests Pollock wasn't creating in a total vacuum. He was maybe the great synthesizer, the powerful executor of ideas that were already starting to circulate in the avant-garde.
That's a very plausible interpretation. It doesn't diminish his achievement, but it contextualizes it.
What about surrealism? Automatism tapping the subconscious.
Definitely an influence, too. Particularly the desire to bypass conscious control, to let the subconscious flow out. Pollock owned a copy of Wolfgang Pahlen's magazine, DYN. Pahlen, a surrealist, was known for a technique called fumage.
Using smoke, like holding a candle under paper.
Exactly, to create these abstract soot impressions. Pollock, apparently ever the competitor, saw this and quipped something like, "I can do that without the smoke."
Showing his ambition to push past existing experiments using pure physical action, pure paint.
Right, taking the core idea, bypassing conscious control, but doing it his way.
The ultimate visualization of this whole revolutionary method came in 1950, the photos and films by Hans Nemeth.
Absolutely iconic.
Yeah.
Nemeth was the young photographer then. He documented Pollock at work in the barn studio. His descriptions are incredibly vivid.
What did he describe?
Walking into the studio, which was chaotic but intensely focused, he said, a dripping wet canvas covered the entire floor. Pollock looked at the painting. Then, unexpectedly, he picked up can and paintbrush and started to move around the canvas.
Capturing the start of the action.
And Namath's account really captures the transformation. His movements, slow at first, gradually became faster and more dance-like. In all that time, Pollock did not stop. How could one keep up this level of activity? Finally, he stopped abruptly, saying, "This is it."
Wow, those images, that footage, it turned him into a media sensation, didn't it? Cemented the image of the artist as this intense athletic performer.
Completely. It defined action painting for the public eye.
So the result of this whole process, when critics analyzed it, they talked about the all-over line. This is one of the most important concepts, right, for understanding his work. Let's try and simplify it.
Okay, so in traditional painting, you almost always have a foreground, the main subject, the figure, and a background, a sense of depth.
Figure-ground relationship, they call it.
Exactly. Pollock, with the drip technique, basically eliminates this entirely. The line, as critics described it, does not give rise to positive or negative areas.
Meaning?
Imagine a dense spiderweb covering the entire canvas. No single section is inherently more important than another. There's no single focal point your eye is drawn to.
The whole surface is equally active, equally energized.
Right. It eliminates that traditional inside-outside space. It creates a sense of pure, liberated line just flowing seemingly infinitely across the entire surface. It's radically democratic in a visual sense.
And we simply cannot talk about Jackson Pollock's success, maybe even his survival during those crucial years, without talking about Lee Krasner.
Absolutely impossible. Lee Krasner was fundamental.
They met in 1942, married in 45. And immediately bought that old wood frame house and, crucially, the barn studio out in Springs, 830 Springs, Fireplace Road.
That barn became the crucible, the legendary space where the drip technique, all of the above. And importantly, she was arguably more knowledgeable and professionally trained in modern art techniques than Pollock was when they met.
Really?
Oh, yes. She essentially became his informal tutor in the tenets of modernism, helping him transition away from his darker, more symbolic, almost regional style towards a more cosmopolitan, purely abstract approach. He trusted her eye. She was reportedly the one judge he could trust regarding his work.
That's incredible. And people around them saw her influence.
Everyone saw it. Art dealer John Bernard Myers stated it very flatly. There would never have been a Jackson Pollock without a Lee Pollock. Simple as that.
And didn't fellow painter Fritz Bultmann have an even more provocative take?
He did. A very controversial assessment. He referred to Pollock as Krasner's creation, her Frankenstein.
Wow, that's intense, emphasizing her enormous role in crafting not just his environment, but maybe his public image, providing the stability his genius needed to flourish.
That's the implication. It's a brutal assessment, framing him almost as a manufactured product rather than a purely self-driven genius.
So was he truly her creation? Or did she just provide the absolutely necessary structure, the physical space, the emotional buffer, the critical feedback, the aesthetic guidance that allowed his unique talent to finally explode?
It's a really compelling paradox, isn't it? And Krasner herself was simultaneously his greatest enabler and, you could argue, the suppressed artist in the relationship.
Because her own work was often seen just as an echo of his.
For a long time, yes. Critics often discussed her work primarily in terms of how it was influenced by his chaotic splatters, despite her integral role in his own move toward modernism. Their dynamic really embodies the complex sacrifices often demanded in artistic partnerships, especially then.
The recognition that followed this period with Krasner's support was phenomenal, though. The fame was fast and intense.
Absolutely rocketed. In August 1949, Life magazine ran that huge 4-page spread.
The one that famously asked, "Is he the greatest living painter in the United States?"
That question alone made him a legitimate media icon, a face for the new, dominant American art. And Time magazine later cemented his notoriety by dubbing him that catchy, if slightly mocking, nickname.
Jack the Dripper in 1956.
Right. Catchy, but trivializing in a way.
But fame, especially that kind of intense media spotlight for a man with such a volatile personality and that ongoing struggle with alcohol, it must have been a heavy burden.
Crushing. The pressure to repeat the success, to keep producing the Pollocks everyone wanted, to monetize the genius, it was overwhelming for him.
And then right at the absolute peak of the drip period, commercially and critically, Pollock did the unthinkable.
He stopped. He abruptly abandoned the style that had made him famous.
Why? Was it artistic restlessness, self-sabotage?
Probably a mix of things. This decision led to a really significant shift, both visually and commercially. Starting around 1951, he entered this darker, less colorful phase.
The black pourings.
Exactly. Instead of those vibrant, complex layers of household enamel, he started using black enamel, often on unprimed, raw canvas.
What was he trying to do with them?
It seems like he was attempting to find this difficult balance between total abstraction and figurative depiction. If you look closely at the black pourings, you can often see these ghostly figurative elements, limbs, faces, emerging from or dissolving into the black lines.
Stepping back from pure abstraction.
Or trying to reintegrate the figure without resorting to traditional representation. It was maybe a psychological retreat, maybe an attempt to prove to himself and others that he was more than just a technical trick, more than just Jack the Dripper.
But commercially?
Commercially, they were a disaster. When he exhibited the black pourings at the Betty Parsons Gallery in New York, she was his dealer then. Not a single one sold initially.
Wow. After the Life magazine article and everything?
Total rejection from the market. Parsons eventually managed to sell just one, apparently to a friend at half price. It really underscored the gap between his artistic needs, his desire to evolve, and the market's demand for the bright, colorful chaos they now expected.
That must have ramped up the pressure dramatically.
It did. And then he switched galleries. From the supportive, more artist-focused Betty Parsons Gallery to the much more commercial, market-driven Sidney Janis Gallery.
And Janis wanted the hits.
Janis faced enormous collector demand for the vibrant drip paintings, the classic Pollocks, and this only exacerbated Pollock's personal frustrations. He felt trapped between his need to evolve artistically and the market's relentless demand for his signature product.
That combination, external demand, internal artistic frustration, and the deepening alcoholism.
It created an explosive, unsustainable situation. His struggles worsened significantly. It ultimately contributed to the crumbling of his relationship with Krasner, too. There was infidelity, his involvement with Ruth Kligman by 1956. The weight of his own genius and fame just became utterly crushing.
Let's dive a bit deeper into the artistry itself, beyond the biography. There was that very deliberate decision Pollock made as he mastered the drip technique, switching from naming his canvases to just numbering them.
Yes, that was a conscious strategy, trying to direct the viewer's experience, or rather, undirected.
Yep.
Well, early on, he'd use titles like Male and Female or Guardians of the Secret. Those titles invite viewers to search for figures, for mythological elements, for a story.
They give you a hook, a way in.
Exactly. But during the peak drip period, he abandoned those conventional titles. He preferred numbers. Lee Krasner explained his reasoning. The numbers were neutral.
Neutral, meaning?
Meaning they didn't impose a narrative or an interpretation. They forced people, in theory, to look at a picture for what it is, pure painting. The goal was to eliminate preconceived ideas and force the viewer into a direct, unmediated encounter with the visual experience itself.
Let the painting speak for itself, basically.
Essentially, yes. This emphasis on purity, on the direct experience, fueled a massive aesthetic and, interestingly, political divide.
Yeah.
Critics rushed in to define what this new art was.
Harold Rosenberg comes to mind. His landmark 1952 article
Coined the term that really stuck, action painting.
Right. And what did Rosenberg mean by that, precisely?
Rosenberg defined the finished work not primarily as a picture, an object, but as an event. The canvas wasn't a surface to represent something. It was an arena in which to act.
The painting documented the action.
Exactly. The painting was the residue of the performance. He saw it as a gesture of liberation. Liberation from traditional forms, from aesthetic rules, maybe even from political expectations in a conformist era. This definition really privileged the violent, spontaneous physical act over the final composition.
But at the same time, his most important critical champion, Clement Greenberg, had a very different take.
Completely different emphasis.
Yeah.
Greenberg provided the staunchest formalist support.
Formalism. Let's remind the listener, that's the view that a painting's quality is judged purely by its visual elements, right? Line, color, composition, flatness. Nothing external like story or emotion matters as much.
Precisely. And for Greenberg, Pollock was the absolute culmination of Western painting history. He argued Pollock's work was the ultimate purification of pictorial form, the logical endpoint of a journey that artists like Manet and Cezanne had started a century earlier by emphasizing the flatness of the canvas and the properties of paint itself.
So Rosenberg sees the action, Greenberg sees the form, two heavyweights defining him in totally different ways.
And both incredibly influential in shaping how Pollock was understood. But then here's where the geopolitics really intrude.
Ah, the Cold War angle.
Right. During the height of the Cold War, the rise of abstract expressionism, with Pollock as its figurehead, wasn't just an internal art world debate. It became a political asset for the United States.
How so? It seems counterintuitive, this difficult abstract art as a weapon.
Well, the CIA backed Congress for Cultural Freedom, actively, though often covertly, sponsored international exhibitions of Pollock's work and abstract expressionism generally throughout the 1950s.
Okay, why would the U.S. government, or at least CIA-funded cultural organizations, champion this messy, challenging art form?
Because it served a very clear propaganda purpose, contrasting starkly with the art of the Soviet Union. Scholars like Eva Cockcroft famously argued that the U.S. government and its allies were promoting abstract expressionism as a weapon of the Cold War.
To elevate American culture over Soviet socialist realism.
Exactly. Soviet art was state-mandated, figurative, politically didactic, often heroicizing workers or leaders. Abstract expressionism, by total contrast, represented freedom, individualism, radical innovation, even a kind of existential angst.
The very ideals the U.S. claimed to champion against Soviet conformity.
Precisely. Pollock's chaotic, unconstrained, seemingly non-political line became a symbol of democratic freedom triumphing over authoritarian artistic constraint. Whether Pollock intended it or not, his art was deployed on the cultural front lines.
That context just adds incredible weight to what might otherwise seem like, well, random paint splatters to some.
It absolutely does. It was about projecting an image of American vitality and liberty.
Okay, moving from critical theory and political maneuvering to forensic science. This is fascinating. One of the most enduring mysteries, or maybe frustrations, surrounding Pollock's legacy is the sheer volume of potential forgeries.
A huge problem. You have infamous cases like the Noodler Gallery scandal, selling fakes for millions, or paintings allegedly found in a locker in Waynescott, Long Island.
The Terry Horton thrift store find, all these contested works popping up.
And this challenge basically compelled scientists to enter the realm of art authentication in a new way. And the major breakthrough, particularly relevant to Pollock, has been fractal computer analysis.
Fractals. Okay, explain that connection.
Back in 1999, a physicist named Richard Taylor started analyzing Pollock's drip paintings using computer analysis, and he found that the painted patterns exhibited statistical similarities to natural fractals.
Fractals. Those are the complex geometric patterns that repeat themselves at different scales, right? Like a coastline or branching trees or clouds.
Exactly. Zoom in on a small part, and it looks similar to the larger structure. Taylor's research team essentially labeled Pollock's style fractal expressionism. They argued his seemingly chaotic drips actually contained this hidden mathematical order found throughout nature.
Which ties back perfectly to Pollock's own philosophy when he famously stated, "I am nature."
It's an uncanny connection, and cognitive neuroscientists have even built on this recently. Studies have shown that viewing Pollock's complex fractal patterns can induce the same kind of stress reduction in observers as looking at naturally occurring fractals, like scenes in nature.
Seriously, so looking at a Pollock might literally calm you down biochemically.
The research suggests it can trigger similar responses in the brain, which implies that his supposedly chaotic method might have actually been tapping into a fundamental, perhaps calming human pattern recognition system, making his work potentially far less random and more intrinsically linked to the natural world than his early critics ever imagined.
This fractal analysis, it has serious real-world applications in authentication then.
Oh, absolutely. By 2015, studies using fractal analysis algorithms were claiming something like a 93% success rate in distinguishing real Pollocks from sophisticated fakes based on the complexity and specific fractal dimension of the patterns.
And it's gotten even better.
Even more recently, a 2024 study incorporated artificial intelligence, machine learning, combined with fractal analysis, and reported achieving nearly 99% success in identifying authentic Pollocks. The science is making a dramatic case for being able to quantify the authenticity of his unique physical action.
It's not always that simple, is it? There are forensic conflicts.
It's definitely not always simple, and science isn't always unify or the final word. In those high-profile disputes, like over the paintings allegedly found in the Waynescott locker, pigment analysis, actual chemical testing of the paint, presented conflicting evidence.
What did the pigment tests show?
Analysis done by experts, including at the Harvard Art Museums, showed the presence of certain synthetic pigments that weren't even patented, let alone commercially available, until the 1980s, long after Pollock's death in '56.
And similar issues with the Noodler Gallery fakes.
Exactly. Pigments, like a specific synthetic yellow paint found in supposed Pollocks sold by Noodler, weren't commercially available until around 1970.
So you have this bizarre situation. The high-tech fractal analysis might say, yes, the pattern, the rhythm, the handwriting looks like Pollock's unique fingerprint.
But the material science, the basic chemistry of the paint itself, is screaming, impossible. This specific molecule didn't exist when he was alive.
It creates this massive contradictory challenge for authentication boards, collectors, museums.
Huge challenge. Which method do you trust? The pattern or the material? It often ends up in court with settled lawsuits and ongoing controversy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the legacy of Pollock is now deeply entangled with forensic science, even neuroscience. The old argument about whether his work is art might be mostly over.
But the argument about which specific work is an authentic Pollock is getting exponentially more complex, and science is right in the middle of it.
Pollock's intense, relatively brief career effectively wound down shortly after he made his final two paintings, Scent and Search, in 1955.
That's right. He produced no paintings at all in 1956, the year he died. Instead, he seemed to channel his remaining creative energy, perhaps seeking something different, into making sculpture.
Sculpture? I didn't know he did that late.
Yes, heavily textured, quite abstract sculptural objects made of wire, gauze, and plaster. He made them at the home of his friend, the architect and sculptor, Tony Smith. It was a brief, final exploration.
An exploration that was cut short violently, August 11th, 1956.
The tragic end. He died in that single-car collision driving under the influence of alcohol less than a mile from his home in Springs.
The crash also killed one of his passengers, Edith Metzger. Ruth Kligman, who was also in the car, survived.
And Lee Krasner, who was actually visiting Europe at the time, had returned immediately upon hearing the news. Her role instantly shifted again from wife and partner and critic to the fierce protector of his legacy.
The art world reacted quickly, though, recognizing his importance almost immediately.
Amazingly quickly. Only 4 months after his death, MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, held a major memorial retrospective exhibition, a huge statement of his significance.
And for the rest of her life, Lee Krasner really dedicated herself to managing his estate, didn't she?
Almost entirely. Fighting tirelessly, sometimes contentiously, to ensure his strong reputation and legacy endured, carefully controlling exhibitions and sales, even as art trends shifted away from abstract expressionism.
They're buried together now, aren't they? In Green River Cemetery in Springs.
Yes, marked very simply, famously, by a large natural boulder for him, and a smaller one marking her grave beside his. A very elemental marker.
And then there's the almost unbelievable financial legacy, the market explosion that somehow rationalizes those, 7, 8, even 9-figure prices for what started as house paint on canvas.
It's staggering. The first really major statement of his global financial worth, the one that caused a huge stir, came in 1973.
When the Australian government bought Blue Poles.
Blue Poles, or number 11, 1952. The National Gallery of Australia purchased it for US $2 million. It sparked global controversy. Was it worth it? Was it even art? But it was a record price for any modern painting at the time.
And that price just kept climbing.
Dramatically upwards. Fast forward to 2006. Pollock's number 5, 1948, reportedly sold privately for a then world record price for any artwork. US $140 million.
$140 million.
And then just a decade later, in 2016, the financier Kenneth C. Griffin reportedly purchased number 17A, another drip painting from 1948, for around $200 million as part of a larger deal.
$200 million. His chaotic drip-based technique became one of the most valuable and coveted artistic commodities of the entire 20th century.
Astonishing.
It truly is. And beyond the market, his influence on subsequent artists was profound, particularly the emphasis on process.
Right, the way he made the art, that physical, ritualistic approach was infectious, wasn't it? It influenced nearly every major art movement that followed in some way. Absolutely. Take his method of staining paint directly into raw, unprimed canvas, allowing the material to soak in rather than just sit on the surface.
That was picked up directly by the next generation, the color field painters.
The entire generation.
Yeah.
Think of Helen Frankenthaler, who saw his work and immediately started experimenting with thinned paint on raw canvas. Morris Louis, Kenneth Noland. That staining technique became central to their work.
And his insistence on the creative process itself, the action being the content, that resonated beyond painting, too.
Definitely. Later sculptors and performance artists really picked up on that. People like Richard Serra with his massive process-oriented sculptures, Eva Hesse working with unconventional materials.
Even the happenings artist, Alan Capro.
Capro explicitly cited Pollock. He wrote an essay called The Legacy of Jackson Pollock, arguing that Pollock destroyed traditional painting and opened the door for artists to work with everyday materials, space, and actions, leading directly to happenings in performance art.
Yeah.
They recognized that the artist's physical involvement, the labor, the gesture, was often more important than the final visual object left behind.
So we've covered this incredible arc, Jackson Pollock, the volatile genius battling his demons, the revolutionary who literally moved painting off the easel and onto the floor, the technical innovator who forced the entire art world to confront that blurry line between deliberate action and apparent chaos.
He fundamentally transformed the idea of the finished image into the event of its creation, the painting as a record of an action.
And that idea of the event, the action, ties back perfectly to that cutting-edge science we discuss.
The fractal analysis, yeah. And modern AI achieving nearly 99% success in authentication based purely on the geometric signature of his movements, his handwriting.
It means that the chaos he embodied on the canvas was, mathematically speaking, extraordinarily ordered, consistent, unique.
Which leads to a fascinating closing thought.
So what does this all mean? If modern science can increasingly demonstrate through fractal analysis and AI that Pollock's supposedly chaotic masterpieces are actually deeply patterned, mathematically consistent, and intrinsically linked to the fundamental structures of the natural world.
Does that prove his genius lay, at least in part, in unconsciously accessing and physically embodying some kind of universal human rhythm, a rhythm we recognize as natural, rather than just, throwing paint around randomly?
Making the chaos not chaotic at all.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the legacy of Pollock is no longer just art, historical, or biographical. It's entering this complex realm of forensic science, cognitive neuroscience. We're only now beginning, perhaps, to understand the intricate mathematical heartbeat beneath the surface of all that volatility and apparent randomness.